everyone, Rich Carlton, and welcome back, or I guess welcome back to me. I am back at headquarters here in Fairfield, California, where we are doing kind of catching up. So I have been basically off for about a month. I am back in the saddle, getting caught up, and it's a little overwhelming to be super absorbed, not really on vacation. For those of you wondering, I was off getting my certified flight instructor for helicopter, which is helicopter itself is just complicated. And then you try to be an official instructor. What I found out is that the government treats it as like a teaching credential. In fact, if you have a teacher credential, they count a lot of the credits that you need towards getting the certified flight instructor. And so I got that completed. I'd worked on it here in California. I ended up going back to Florida. It's like you've been called back to Top Gun. I went back to Florida where I did it originally because the people in California out where I'm at couldn't do it. They weren't sufficiently serious. It's kind of like doing, like if you hired somebody to do FileMaker work for you and they could only, and you needed them to work every day, but they'd only work half a day a week. That's the kind of stuff I was dealing with in California. And so I went back to Florida. That's where I've been. I am back in the saddle. I've already been talking to Claris, getting up to date so I can help bring all of you up to speed on that. Do we have anyone who cares about the latest news with FileMaker or Claris? Cares about news at Claris?
I had someone ask me about it the other day on Friday. So,
Okay, so Claris is in a process of discovering why the developers are not in love with the Claris platform bundle or Claris Studio specifically. And so they are attempting to work and remediate the issues. That being said, I think it's a discovery project down there. I'm not gonna. It's my first day back. I'm not gonna sit on them. They're trying hard. I think the goal is the overall part that it doesn't really concern me too much is that they're continuing to service the Claris platform. Once again, we have this idea that they have the FileMaker platform, they have the Claris platform. They're two like parallel tracks of basically FileMakers, like two versions of FileMaker, and they changed the name and they really, if once you have a solution in one, you really don't they don't talk to each other, but they're effectively identical. And they really, at the end of the day, want everyone to get to the Claris platform, the newer one, because it has more good stuff in it. The problem is it's incomplete. It's still incomplete. It was incomplete when I left. I came back. It's still incomplete. It'll probably be incomplete for 6 to 8 to 12 months would be my guess. I don't know. I've asked them about certain things that they need to add to it. And they're like, well, we know that's important, but it's not on our schedule of to-do list yet. So, which means that if it's not on there, remember they work their schedules. They schedule things out. They have kind of a loose idea what they're going to do over the next 3 or 4 months. They have a very loose idea. The vice presidents do over 6 months. They don't have much of a view beyond that. Now, I know their sales team and their management team would like to know what they're going to do 12 months and 2 years away, things like that. But their engineering product management groups are running on a very short, agile development cycle. So as of right now, they have not scheduled to get everything done and completed. That being said, there continues to be PDF printing problems with the newer versions of FileMaker, even in Pro 19.6.3. So the current server version is 19.6.2 or 6.3, and the client, the Pro version, is up to that as well. So if you're using the latest, greatest versions, if I come over here to, here's 19.6.1, it will probably say, hey, Richard, would you like to update? Whoa. And so the short version is that I'm going to be talking to Claris. Yeah, the current version is 19.6.302. There's some bug fixes in there, probably some important ones. I would recommend you go ahead and set it up and get it going. Or install. If you're already on 19.6, go ahead and run the update. If you're not on 19.6, why are you not on 19.6? There might be a good reason, like maybe you're on 19.5.4. I wouldn't update every version every time, right? We're back to this conversation, right? Jacob Taylor, my server guy, he's a good guy, but he's upgrading the FileMaker server at RCC a little more frequently than I am comfortable with. He does it about every 6 months. Historically, I've done it every couple of years because it was such a pain in the ass. Things tend to get broke. So, but Claris is moving pretty rapidly. And so, yeah, so it's you figure out where you want to upgrade is a big question. Thank you for being supportive while I've been gone. Nick's been here. Hopefully you have good, if you have any feedback or comments about Nick, not Nick, let me know about that. So we are recording, Margaret. We are streaming. So let's talk about the broadcast. Oh, I don't know if this is going to work at all. Let me go to, if I go to fmtraining.com, you can see live training, the upcoming broadcast schedule. So let's talk about this a little bit because there's some important things in here I want to clue you folks in on. So today I'm here. Mr. Taylor, I don't think will be here. He might show up at some point. Margaret, if you want to send him an invite, if he's bored, he can show up to this. We got more Nick. Nick is not going anywhere. Okay. Open Q&A on Friday. I'll probably be around to help with that, but that's kind of like if you have like a completely out of the blue question about FileMaker, we will try to answer that question. Okay. So let's talk about the broadcast schedule a little bit. So what's interesting, what's coming up, what we've been cooking on a little bit, if I go to the CMS database here, we have a set of JavaScript. So this is a little bit deeper into the pool. JavaScript training sessions that are going to be coming up. I'm going to bring these up for you so you can see what we've been working on. This has been kind of, this conversation started probably a year ago with the gentleman. His name's Leland Long. He kind of offered this to some other training, FileMaker training companies, and they were like, they just couldn't come to an agreement on how they might do it. And so I had a conversation with him about that, and for me, it was easy to come to an agreement with him on doing this training material. So I say, shoot, future. Oh, here we go. Here's future events. So what happens if I scroll ahead in the future? The gray ones are the ones that are kind of being scheduled and set up. Margaret's going to be setting up the material for Monday, which is Jake Shealy showing some stuff that'll be pretty interesting. Margaret, are you going to get this finished up, submitted for us? Yes?
Yes,
Oh,
I literally.
Okay, as I say it, she's
I
clicking
literally just got
But-
Jake Shealy's description as you were saying it, so it's apparently
yeah,
custom functions. In case anyone's wondering.
Custom shenanigans on Monday. So, or that's Monday a week from today. So she's busy putting this stuff in. Normally we book about 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So then we get down to here. So mark your calendars. So Nick is going to be given a couple weeks off. And Nick is like, oh yeah, I could go on vacation, and I'm like, well, I don't know, it's that big of a time off, but yeah. So what Leland is going to do is going to be doing some JavaScript 101, like the beginnings of JavaScript and understanding JavaScript and doing things like that. And it's going to be, okay, it's JavaScript 101 for 4 days, and then it's JavaScript 102 for a couple days, and 103 for a couple days. So there's like 10 days of JavaScript. This is free training as part of this live stream, okay? After he is done with this, he is going to, we're gonna continue the live streams. It'll be other topics with Nick or whoever. And what's going to happen is down here, we're going to have him move off to a different time slot. And if people want to pay him to go deeper into JavaScript, basically what he built, and of course I don't have my phone in front of me, he built a client application on an Android device, and it looks like Starting Point, right? It looks like Starting Point, kind of like the iPhone variant in Starting Point, but it's on Android, kind of a web-enabled app using React Native, and it goes to the internet and talks to the data API, DAPI, on the FileMaker server. And so basically his goal is to show you how to build a basic client with JavaScript. Now this is pretty deep, okay? So this is not for the faint of heart. If you're the person that when you hear low code or no code, you're like, whoa, that's too much work, not for you, okay? But if you like to go deeper, most of you here are deeper people, then this will be something you might be interested in. So he's going to charge for this. He makes most of the money. I'm just going to help facilitate it. I think this is going to be like a bunch of classes, and not all of it's scheduled here. There'll be quite a bit more of it. I think it's going to be like $299 or something like that. But that's to pay him for his time. That was his price point. And so just keep that in mind. So he's going to do like 10 days of free training, partly to get everyone educated, partly to educate. And then if you really like what he's doing, then you can pay to get the deeper dive of more JavaScript training. So if you're into that, not everyone is, but if you're into that, then that would be a good place to go. So just think about that. So today's broadcast and conversation, let's talk about that a little bit. So today's conversation is, we originally were talking about top 10, always the top 10 habits of successful CEOs, or top 10 habits of people who lose weight, or top 10 habits of race car drivers. So what I wanted to do was not necessarily the top 10 things, and we're going to have Margaret help us with this. So Margaret, do you have a computer where you can work on this? Do you want me to work on it, or do you want to type on this while we're doing it?
I can type while we're doing it. Yeah.
Locate me. So the idea is the top items. So you have the top 10 things you need to think about as a software developer. It's not even really specific to FileMaker. We could put some FileMaker specific things in there, but I want your ideas and feedback. So the idea was that you have the top 10 things as a developer we have to worry about. So most of the people here, things we think about. But what I wanted to do was share with people who are customers, not necessarily our customers, because then mostly they would have been guided through this already, hopefully, if not, right? But you want to, it's what the people, so if you're hiring someone to do FileMaker work for you, what are the top 10 things that they need to do? Now, as a developer, if they don't know these, you need to help guide them through this, right? And so I want feedback here. So I'm looking at Discord through Discord. So if you have comments and things, and I'm also looking at William Woods there on YouTube, and also I want to bring up Twitch if I can do that. I'm not sure if I can bring that up or not, but I'm watching for comments. So if you're watching us through Twitch, YouTube, or Discord, definitely comment if you have a thought about what we're saying or have ideas or suggestions. So the top 10 things that people get into trouble. So the idea is that if you don't do these things, your FileMaker project might be in trouble. Now, I'm going to state a couple things off the top first. I guess you need to have a developer you work with. You need to have a relationship with a developer. There has to be kind of this fundamental trust of the developer, okay? So let's assume that you have that. I can't help you with that, right? Because it sounds very self-serving. And so I'm not going to really get into how and why you love your developer, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to have someone that you like and respect and want to work with them. So the number one item that I think people, they need a custom application created. These are once again, customers that hire developers. And the developer could be in-house or it could be an outside developer. So it could be like if Canberra was still working at Sandia Labs, it wasn't retired, and then Sandia Labs had this need, and they would say, Canberra, can you build this for us? And Canberra decides he's going to build it for him. It's within the organization, but probably two different groups within the organization, the group who needs something and the group who can provide it, right? So the idea is that when a group needs a custom application, the number one thing is that they're going to have a problem organizing and managing data. So the sequence of events is that we're working really hard, life sucks, I hate working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 15 or 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. How do we make this better besides just quitting? One of the ways, if they're passing a bunch of paper, a lot of folders, manila folders, etc., is to get a custom application that automates the processes for them. They could huge return on investment time savings with that. So the thing that you have to understand is before they will buy FileMaker or hire a developer to help them, or even in-house, there has to be a level of pain. I used to be, Claris hated when I would say this. They would come to me and go, Richard, we don't want to talk about pain and solving people's pain. That's not professional for, right? I'm like, dude, if people don't buy Tylenol or Advil or headache medication unless they have a headache, okay? So I speak very plainly about this. So the customer has to be in pain. Their life sucks. They see you as the medication to make it better. The problem is it's not as simple as just popping a pill. They have to, A, have the need, B, have a source of funding. One way or another, they have to either have the budgetary authority to commit funds to this. And Margaret, I'm not really watching at this moment. I'm letting you just write on here. And we're going to give these notes to everyone. So we will post these notes. I know we'll post them today, but we'll post them tomorrow for sure. As a PDF, you can have it PDF or a Word file if you want, or pages or Word file. That's fine. So Margaret's taking these notes, but we want your feedback as well. So basically the project management triangle is what Andy says. Yeah. So Andy's completely correct. So the issues is that you have to have the budget set aside. The customer has to have the needs. The huge part, they don't realize this, and it's kind of the chicken or the egg issue. If they're working 14 hours a day because their life sucks, if they're going to help you build software, or you're going to build software for them, they have to communicate what they need to you and test what you're building for them and have this relationship of this dialogue. Well, that's more hours per day. That is actually as big of a problem for most people as the budget. I see those two problems being, a lot of people say, well, we need this. Well, we don't have the money. Okay, fine. But then I see people who have the money, but they can't go from a 14-hour day to a 16-hour day, which is what it would take, right? You can't build this if you want to keep. It's like the TV, you see this at circuses or carnivals or maybe on YouTube. Some guy keeping all the plates in the air, the pie, the plates in the air. They have those little pokey things, and they're spinning the plates on these little spots, and they spin a plate, spin a plate, spin a plate, and as they get to the end, the plates start falling off because the plates are spinning, but they slow down naturally, and then they fall off and they break on the floor. So every time a plate falls off, it shatters on the floor. So they have a huge stack of plates. They're spinning these things, and they have to keep all their plates in the air at one time. And if they're already maxed out, how do they add your plate, the FileMaker plate, the Claris platform plate, if you want to call it that, and talking to you as a developer? That's a huge deal. It's really a huge deal. In fact, we ask customers, I say, hey, you have budget? Yeah, we do. We got X number of dollars. Or, yeah, we have budget. We expect it to cost at least 30,000. I'll come up with a magical number, $30,000, $50,000, whatever it is. Okay. $5,000. Okay. Can't do much for that, but whatever. And so what happens is that then I go, well, do you have time to do this? And they go, what do you mean? And so the issue really, as we all know, is getting them to explain their details, right? A lot of times their needs are in their head, and you have to extract out of their head. We've had this conversation before. We call it the telepathic unicorn. The customer is going to wave their hands at you and tell you they're in pain and this is why, but they're going to leave a lot of details out, and you have to kind of interrogate them to get the data out of them. And without that, you have to use a telepathic unicorn. It's kind of a joke because there's no such thing. So that means if you can't get the customer to tell you what you need, it's, as NASA says, it's end of mission. They're dead, right? They're dead, Jim. The project's dead. They have to be able to tell you what they need. And if they can't find the time to do that, you have a huge problem. So that's kind of this item number 4 issue that goes on. And so the customers don't realize they need the time. And folks, if you have comments or thoughts or questions on this, but it's a dollar issue. It's first they have a need, and maybe they don't realize they need software, but they know that they're working 14 hours a day and that sucks, or 12 hours a day and that sucks. And so that's the pain part. Then, well, do you have money for the medicine that will fix you? Yeah. Or a doctor's appointment that will fix you, right? Okay, yes, I have the money. Do you have time to go to the doctor? No, if I go to the doctor, then I can't get this stuff done. So they have to crash to the ground, or they have to come to the realization that they're going to have to somehow do something to get that time. So that's an essential element, right? Get the time. Then they have to provide, and then during that time, they're going to provide you not just the requirements of what they need, but as you build it, hopefully you're building it. And my recommendation is build it kind of agile. Big government contracts, big corporate contracts, not necessarily this way, where they say it's called the waterfall method, where you have this big, giant 40-page document, and then you build the 40 pages, and then you say, ta-da, it's done, here it is. As opposed to kind of this agile method, which is kind of what Claris is at, where they do revisions and updates every 3-4 weeks, 2-3-4 weeks, and then there's feedback and iteration on there. So iteration with the customer provides early feedback. That's what David Angel says: brainstorming, business analysis, design, programming, integration, quality assurance. Yeah, that's all great, but you have to. Yeah, so Andy brings up a good point about this. There's 2 comments here. David Angel points out something: brainstorming, business analysis, design, programming. That, David, is the top 10 bits as a developer. But that's kind of like, it's very textbook. What he said isn't wrong. So Margaret, I don't know if you want to copy and paste what David put in there. It's interesting. It's not wrong. It's just that if you say that to someone, the end customer, like that, their eyes are going to glaze over. They're not going to understand what you're saying unless you're dealing with a high IQ person who's not working 14, 16 hours a day. If they're working 14, 16, there it is right there, the phase 1, phase 2. If they're working that hard, they don't even have time to think about brainstorming and this stuff. You have to pin them down on, Do you know what your needs are? Yes, you do. Did you write them down? Yes or no? Do you have any sort of budget? Yes or no? You have to break it down really basically. As a developer, you have to guide the customer through this conversation. They're not going to think about those things, right? Um, you have to get inside their head and figure out what's going to make the customer successful and establish the criteria for really managing their expectations. What are their expectations? What do they really need? What are they expecting to happen? Now, once again, we're back to this idea of the telepathic unicorn, right? That's why the government once upon a time invented, or whoever this invented this land waterfall design methodology, right? Having two people talk about it and then one person going off and building it and bringing it back was not necessarily the best way of building an application. Uh, um, so they would build a big contract and do this big study and do all this thing, and then they would find at the end of that still wasn't what they needed. So having some items written down and getting rapid turnaround, agile feedback is an important part of that process. Getting them to see the builds of the layouts, the prints, the reporting early on before it's really locked in concrete is super useful. Andy points out the top 10 tips for succeeding FileMaker project could be the top 10 for succeeding.
He's saying they could be these are top 10 tips for like succeeding at projects in general.
We just swiped through the FileMaker. That's true. That I missed the. I'm looking over here like, oh, it's cut. Okay, so he put a strike through on that. Yeah, so it's true. Everything we're saying right now is generic. It'll get a little more specific here momentarily because we're going to talk about some FileMaker specific things. But it's 90% project 90% communication, 10% planning. I totally agree with that. But people who are in pain, who are running around with their heads cut off, and it's not just small business. You can have listen. I could go to departments at Apple and they're running around with their heads cut off and they could use some automation, right? I guarantee this to be the case, right? Not everyone, but some people certainly. And so they have to find the time to do that. So you getting them to understand that they have to communicate, and the communication has to be initially, maybe every day, maybe every other day, frequent communication, lots of iteration feedback. I think that's really great. But you have to plan what to ask. If you ask the right questions, you could cut some pain. Yeah. So what I'm saying to you is, if you're a person who's hiring a developer, these are things, the upfront things immediately you have to think about. If you're a developer in-house or a contractor, then outside developer, then these are the things that you need to be looking for. Maybe guide your customer through these if you have that kind of relationship with them and they trust you, right? So that's super important. Now, once we get past the point that the customer has money, they have a need, and they're willing to carve out the necessary time to explain to you the requirements for you to decide some sort of planning schedule. We're going to build this module first. So let's talk about things that are helpful. High traction items. So as you're building for a customer project, one of the things that customers are sensitive to is seeing bang for the buck. And once again, and I always, this is something I learned, the first year or two I was doing this back in 1994, 5, is that if they put a bunch of money into you or into a developer, either in-house or outside, they want to see things that are happening because of that, and they ideally want to be able to take advantage of it and benefit from it. If you have a system that you're building and it's a giant, huge system that the customer can't grasp it, it's too deep for them, and it's this huge investment, and you have to spend a month or 2 months coding this thing before it even can be slightly useful and the customer can see it, that's going to be a point of friction. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's good or bad, it just is. It's going to be a point of friction. So what I tell my engineers to do is to make sure, if you're working on a big giant block of this thing that they really can't see progress on, besides you showing them the code, here's the scripts, do some other things, capture the low-hanging fruit along the way, especially on the front end, to help build credibility. So you find some things that you can do for them with a lower level of investment to generate higher value on the front end, so they can see those things. And that way, as you're going along the project, you say, well, we're going to get this one spot where you're not going to see a lot. We could talk about it. I can give you updates. We'll meet every other day, whatever you want to do. But you won't be able to use it until I get this big block of work done. those are the ones you have to carefully manage and manage expectations. And maybe along the way, while you're doing this big one, you take a little bit of time out and you do some small low-hanging fruit items along the way to keep the customer enthusiastic, right? Eat something, you spend 2 or 3, 5 hours, 8 hours on something, and they get this huge return on investment that saves all this time. It's something to be cautious about. I think it's a very, very important consideration. So things that you have to think about as a FileMaker developer, okay? And I'm not going to get into the Claris platform stuff. Let's just assume that you're on the FileMaker platform for now, and you're not using the Claris platform yet. So you have a server that you have to use, right? You're going to set up a server, okay? Your average customer, 99.9% of the customers cannot set up their own FileMaker server themselves. The person you're interacting with is probably not an IT person. They can't set the server up. I did a complete install of a Mac server the other day on my office because my old one died, the drive died, so I had all the database backed up. I got an M1 Mac Mini. I did the install. I had to go online, figure out a couple. Jacob wasn't around, so I did the entire install myself. I'm not nearly as deep as Jacob is. I prefer to avoid command line if all possible, but I knew there were a couple things I needed to do. So I had to look up how to reset the cache, do these things. So I was able to accomplish that, but most people are not. Your end users are much less technically sophisticated than I am. So they're not going to be able to do this. So who's going to do that for them? If you can do it for them, that's great. Who's going to maintain the server long term? If they can afford a very basic server and they don't need any plugins or any fanciness, you can use Claris Cloud or the FileMaker Cloud, their FileMaker server-based service that runs up in the cloud. You can do that. It's a little pricey, especially at larger volumes of people, but it's completely hands-free from your need to babysit it. That being said, it's got a lot of limitations. As a developer, you need to be careful and watching out for the limitations. There's no server-side plugins, DAPIs that either doesn't work or you have to find a unicorn and kill it and sprinkle its blood on it to get DAPI to work. It's a real hack. The people post blog articles about it, but I've never actually ever seen it actually work with that, because most time Apple, for security reasons, doesn't want people having PHP or other APIs coming through their network. Because remember, when Claris hosts it for you, you're actually on a Claris machine, and Claris is Apple, right? Let's just be clear about that. Apple doesn't want people, building services underneath in their data centers, right? Because they see it as a security point that someone could get in and exploit. I'm not saying there's an exploitation on it, but I'm saying there's a general concern about that. They want to minimize that. So Apple security, not a big fan of that. That's why they don't like server-side plugins, things like that. That's another security moment, right? Like, what if Christian Schmidt, the monkey bread guy who's hanging out here, writes a plugin that finds out it's on an Apple-based server and it runs some illicit little program that does something? Christian Schmidt would never in a million years do that. But I'm saying that as a plugin developer, I could probably find a plugin developer and give them $15 million and they would do something like that, right? That's that line from that movie, The Way of the Gun. Cash is what you take to the grocery store. $15 million is motivation with a universal adapter. Okay. Okay. So I thought that was very illustrative of the things that you run into. So understand that Claris has limitations on their hosted server. So if you want the server to run plugins and do all this other great stuff, you're going to have a Mac server, Windows server, or Linux server, and the customer might run it. Now, this gets to IT departments. If you are working with a customer, they have an IT department. That IT department will be typically either belligerent and anti-FileMaker, or they will be apathetic, like they don't care. If they're anti-FileMaker, anti-Claris, anti-Apple, whatever, you're gonna have to learn how to overcome that. If they're apathetic, then they won't block it, but they're not gonna help you. Every once in a while, I would say there's 10% of them out there, if you went to all IT organizations out there, that actually try to be helpful, okay? So you have that end of it. And then you would help them. They would set up the server and that kind of thing. And hopefully they would configure it correctly. That's kind of a separate conversation. Then there's this managed service provider conversation, Margaret. We ran into that, right? Remember that from this morning's conversation with
Yeah.
Jacob?
Yes,
What
yes.
was that? It was managed.
I think you said it, management service provider.
Yeah, so it's when you basically hire a company to outsource your IT to. So here's the deal with these people. Okay, understand a managed service provider is kind of like a little bit like a Costco, right? Um, it's high volume, it's low profit margins, but high volume, so that's where they make their money. So your typical managed service provider, they're going to provide consulting services generically, like you're going to get Gmail or Outlook support and basic web support and basic internet connectivity, whatever they're going to manage for you off of their existing menu of stuff that they do. Okay. FileMaker is not going to be on their existing menu of stuff they do at all, zero. Now they might tell you, yes, 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 no problem. Like their salesperson will say, yes, 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 no problem. But then they don't know how to, they'll set it up, they won't configure it correctly, or they won't establish backups. We could go through a very long list because Jacob Taylor deals with this all the time, and people get upside down with stuff. And he finds out that they don't maintain the server. An MSP maintains it, and the MSP had never even heard of FileMaker before or Claris before, and now they put the server together. It's all great. Well, that's like me going out trying to say, "Here's the keys to a helicopter. Go fly it yourself. Good luck." There's got videos of people doing that. I should pop that video up and show you. It's wild. The guy did that. He ended up not killing himself. It's one of the better videos that I've ever seen. Guy buys a Hughes 300 or a Schweitzer 300, gets in it, fires it up, can start it, and kind of knows how the controls work. And off he goes, and it's just a wild mess. And at the end of it, it's splattered, destroyed. So understand IT departments either typically will hate Claris FileMaker and try to block it, or they'll be apathetic. I normally hope for apathetic because then, that's the best I hope for. But every once in a while, you get someone who's actually productively helpful, right? So comments and questions along the way, William Wood, people on YouTube, kind of a light conversation today. I was hoping to have other items here but Margaret's putting this down on this document. So if you want to get a copy of this, we'll give it to you. But on Discord, YouTube, Andy, Canberra, folks are awful quiet. I know it's kind of a boring topic for you, but I ran into this the other day where, we had people who wanted they hire RCC, they have money, they get going, and about a week in the project, like a balloon, it pops and they disappear. And then they come back 3 or 4 months later, 5 months later, and like, why is it not done? Well, you've been gone. We've been looking for you. You haven't emailed me. Well, here's an email chain of 12 emails we sent you that you've been ignoring because you're busy you're back to dealing with your pain, right? So that's kind of a big one, right? So it's important that you make sure that these people understand that there's a high degree of interaction in building a great piece of software with the Claris platform. The reason you don't use waterfall, like all the specs up front generally, is because people don't fully understand or appreciate what the Claris FileMaker platform can do for them. And because of that, as you build them and show them things and they see things, they go, well, wouldn't it be great if this button could do this and this and this? Well, that wasn't on the original spec. That's also why waterfall is hard, because it doesn't allow you to customize in flight, change directions. Well, you want this to do these extra things. We didn't discuss that. It'll take more time. Oh, that's fine. It'd be really great. What you're showing me is so wonderful. It's helping me so awesomely. I will, no problem. We'll pay for that, right? So you want a flexible relationship with the customer, right? There are FileMaker consultancies out there, a big chunk of them that absolutely refuse to do fixed cost projects. RCC generally won't do them as a general rule unless there's extraordinary circumstances as to, it's specified, it's spec'd, and it's very well documented. And then, maybe we go down that road. But the happiest customers are the ones who provide feedback along the way, and you incorporate their feedback and you really tune it to their specific needs. And it's all based upon, as Andy said, communication, right? And actually between David Angel and Andy, they said that waterfall isn't a good model. Yeah, well, but it is. But a lot of government things are still built that way, right? It's like, I have a real hard time dealing with sometimes local county governments. Local governments are okay, but anything at the state level or the federal level, if you can get the contract, it can be pretty lucrative, but they're kind of a nightmare, right? Even getting them set up. And then you deal with waterfall. And see, the rub with waterfalls, people write down what they thought they wanted on a piece of paper, turns into a printed document like what you see on screen right here. And what happens is that they get it and they use it, and it's not nearly as great and awesome as it could have been if they had provided early and often feedback and you had been paid to go down, go to incorporate their feedback, right? Like, oh, I didn't know. Here's the classic line. I didn't know Claris FileMaker could do that. Really? It could do that? Well, if it could do that, can it do this and this and this and this? And those things right there could save the customer infinitely larger amounts of time. So the scope changes and you don't adapt to it. Yeah. So with the waterfall. Now there's this thing called so the flip side of this conversation is also one you have to be aware of. It's called spiral development. And I could name people I know who are kind of in this model too. And spiral development is the ultimate kind of this agile thing. Agile's kind of its own specific ideas about schedules and scrums and teams and things like that. But at a very high level, Agile's about building some stuff on a short window and getting immediate feedback, and then building more stuff in it. Not big development chunks, but little development chunks, right? Spiral is kind of more loosely this idea. You tell me to go build it, I build it. You tell me to go build it, I build it. It's instant, it's unlimited flexibility. And the problem is you don't know how much the cost is. What so waterfall suffers from software that sucks. Generally it gets completed, but it sucks. It's not as good as the customer wanted, right? Or maybe it's not what the customer wants at all because the documentation is not great. Now, Spiral is great because you're getting this, it's what the customer wants, but the customer doesn't know how much it costs, and they go hog wild with it, and they run out of budget, right? They're going great. 6 months into it, they go, holy shit, I can't believe I spent this much money on it. Then they come to you and goes, how much to finish it? And you're like, what? Right? So that is as I will mention this to you, Christian Olson, and those of you met, he's the director of my coaching, basically the FileMaker side of the company. The senior engineers don't really report to him, but kind of he's a big piece of the organization here at RCC, and one of the kind of the owners of the company. And he goes, if you want me to, he tells people this, if they go, well, how much is this going to cost? And he goes, cost. You'll give me a fixed cost estimate for this big project. And he tells the people that, and I've heard him say this on the phone before, and he tells them, he looks right into their eyes and he says, any estimate that I give you right now will be an exercise in me lying to you. I have to make it up. None of it would be accurate or in any way real. He says that to the customer straight face right up front. And the customer goes, holy wow, right? Because we have no idea, right? It's like getting in a taxi cab and saying, let's go somewhere, to the taxi cab driver. And then you say, well, we want to go somewhere. Where do you want to go? Well, I'm not really sure where I want to go, but I need to know how much it costs. Right? And along the way, we might take detours and go places, right? Like go to the next state over, 500 miles away, a couple days, right? Taxi cab person, the person, even an Uber, you get in that Uber, like, well, let's go for a ride. And you do the Uber app. Well, where do you want to go? For Uber to give you a cost, you have to provide exact details of where you want to go. What if you don't have exact details of what your software does, right? So a big issue. I beat this one to death. I think a new version of the Claris will integrate DevOps. DevOps helps in engineering of the software. David, is that like an official? Because I know there's a DevOps application out there. It was called Oliver or Brian or something. It was made by a guy in Europe, right? Yeah. So there are applications out there. There's a company out there that made this app, and I was a little worried for them. I can't remember. It was demoed. We saw it demoed. It's really kind of cool, but someone put probably $1 million of development, I would think. Certainly many hundreds of thousands of dollars into this DevOps application. And it was, you guys remember, you saw the name of it. Was it Oliver? It had some cute little name, Opus or something like that. And it did DevOps, developer operations, the idea of trying to schedule and giving assignments and managing. It's very impressive, right? Multiple servers doing things. What are the servers doing? Where's the code at? Where's it going? It's an important topic, but this company built this thing, and they were trying to sell it to FileMaker developers, of course. And I did the math on it, and the number of FileMaker companies that would actually need it might be 20 or 30 companies. And if all 20 or 30 companies bought it, it would not be enough to recoup the cost of this application, right? So I was a little concerned about that when I did the math on that. It was really impressive, but the FileMaker community, as of the current time, kind of a flat number. It's, active developers, it's probably, and when I say active developer, I'm talking about someone who goes into layout mode, right? It's probably 50,000, 60,000 worldwide. It's not a giant number. It could be bigger, but Claris has to do some things to help it grow, right? Auto. No, not auto. Auto is the automated. Yeah, that's a good. I understand the question, right? What you're asking. Auto is kind of like deploy. The deploy product from 360 works. It helps you roll out and launch new versions of code and things like that. This other application may have done it too. I looked at it and they wanted. It was almost too much for RCC, but the biggest reason I wouldn't buy it is because before I buy something from someone, I want to make sure they're still going to be in business. And these people, the only way they stay in business is if someone bigger buys them, right? And uses this software for other things besides FileMaker, right? Because it's a big, big, big product. It's a really big product. Impressive as hell, but yeah. So there are other products out there that do other bits and pieces of this, but it's called developer operations. Once again, most of us here are not in a company that big that needs that kind of stuff. It's fun to look at, but basically you're being paid on a per hour basis during the day to do work. And if you're spending all your time during the day trying to manage your developer infrastructure, you'd have to have 20, 30, 50, 80 developers to be working for you before developer operations in a real big way becomes useful. Otherwise, you're spending money on something that doesn't have a high ROI. You have to have a high ROI where that becomes useful. Like having a dedicated training person at RCC, like let's see, Nick Hunter, right? So he has that job to a degree. I've had a couple of people to tell me that they wanted to work for me and have that job. I said, well, I could always fire Nick Hunter. I said, well, no, you need to hire me too. And I'm like, okay, well, how many dedicated, I have a total of 25 staff or something like that, maybe 28 staff. Always right below 30 seems to be the number we're at. And how many of those people should they just be dedicated internal trainers that don't work on external projects, right? How many of those can I afford to have, right? And Andy's busily typing. I have to agree with this. FileMaker isn't just for big companies. Having automated testing, continuous integration deployment is a time saver. Yeah, I'm not arguing against DevOps, right? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but someone has to build it and put it in the product and support it and be in business next year. Because if you get going down this road and the company's suddenly out of business, right, then what, right? So that's my concern with that, right, Andy? If David's asking about auto, auto is more of it's actually kind of DevOpsy, but it's the big one that was really impressive was it's like a European company that was doing it. Anyway, but you have like, for example, 360 deploy. It's kind of a very basic deployment automation thing. I love it. We use it, but it's not cheap. It's not free. There's a little bit of setup and you have to deal with things. But if you build a vertical market application, some of you who build vertical market applications and you have 10 or 12 or 50 or 100 customers, you could build it once, hit the button, and it rolls it out and updates all your customers on all their servers. That's huge. That's a huge time savings, right? So in that case, for a vertical market application, it's very useful. But if you're building a custom solution for one customer, you might be working on the live file. If you're working on the offline file, that's fine, but then you're going to have to roll that one forward. So then maybe that's where 360 deploy comes in. But the rub is that then you rolling forward, you're rolling backwards. See, that gets into a larger conversation about working on live files or not, right, Andy? So Andy's talking about broader things in this. My biggest concern with someone who brings up a revolutionary kind of piece of software is that they're gonna have the revenue and the money to support to continue. Like 360 Works makes money. They're a profitable company. They've been around a long time. I have a high degree of confidence in them. Productive computing, I disagree with them on some things, but at the end of the day, they have been successful. They are profitable. They're not going to go away tomorrow. Watch them go out of business tomorrow, but I would be shocked to see that. Goya, Nick Orr's company in Australia, Base Elements, another highly reliable company, been around a long time. They're not going to go anywhere, right? So when I see a company that I would have to wrap my organization around in terms of trusting them to be there, I need to make sure it's an organization that they're not just a brand new startup. I don't give a shit who it is. If you're a brand new startup and you come to me and say, "Hey, buy my stuff. It's the greatest stuff ever," I'm going to be like, right? Okay. So just because I don't want to have to build it, have it go away, and then do it all over again, because my time is expensive. Most of your folks, your time is precious to you. It's expensive. You don't want to waste it, right? So if you're going to buy something or do something, you want to make sure it's on a platform that's going to be around. That's why when we talk about the FileMaker platform, I can do it with absolute certainty. It's not going to go anywhere. Claris is bobbling around with the studio thing, trying to figure their way forward with that. But that's kind of their playground, their sandbox, their playground of them trying to build a new product with very varying levels of success, right? But their core product, the FileMaker platform, which will mostly be this Claris platform, that's been around for like 33 years. It's not going to go anywhere. So when I tell people have trust and faith in that to continue, I'm being very serious about that, right? It's an important thing, right? Apple uses it. Apple corporate uses the FileMaker platform. Also good for horizontal scaling your application across country. Yeah, so that is back to the deploy conversation. 360 Works deploy. So as soon as we get to automated deployment, updating, rollback, I use 360 Works deploy. The competing product from Geist Interactive is called Auto. I haven't used it. I don't know anything about it besides effectively it came out after 360 Works deploy did. And so it's two people kind of fighting, two companies fighting it out in this space in the community. I think depending upon your needs, having a solution and rolling it out to multiple servers simultaneously is the way to go. If you want replication, server replication and synchronization, that's a different product in the world of FileMaker. That's going to be a sync product. In my case, I'd use 360 Works MirSync for that. Yeah, so DevOps, it's a good conversation. We should. I try to get a hold of Jesse Barnum and have him come on the show and talk about that. He's always so busy, but well, I said, if you don't come on the show and help me sell your product, then how the hell am I supposed to do that? Because I use it, I love it, I think it's great. They have great customer service. It's not like they're perfect. Whenever they have a new version, they always break something happens, and you have to let them fix the bugs, and then it gets stable, then you roll that one out. But it's a really good company. I like that company quite a bit. Aaron, so any final questions today? I know it's kind of off topic a little bit, or it's relevant, but Devin, that's it. Thank you. Aaron, thank you. Aaron, I don't know quite who you are, but whichever Aaron you are, thank you for that. Aaron, that's it. That's Devin. So Margaret, if you want to pop that on screen real quick, you can click on it. This is the one that's amazing, and I'm marginally terrified that it, the interface is amazing, but I'm marginally, terrified that, it's a brand new company and how, and where does it go, right? Long term, right? So, but I think having developer operations built into FileMaker, either like the deploy product or auto or something like that, I think there's a high value for that, right? I agree with that. I just don't want to buy something and have them go out of business the next day. Okay, because remember, this is not Claris over here, right? This is a company I've never bought a product from before. So let's say hypothetically Claris goes broke or won't be continued, right? Andy, I think I to be completely honest with you, that's not. I'm okay. To be completely honest, I am completely committed. My knowledge and skill set is completely committed to the Claris FileMaker platform. I can tell you, Apple is utterly dependent upon the use of the FileMaker, Claris FileMaker platform internally to run the company, okay? You may not understand this. I will simply tell you that there are a number of developers who help support just the databases and systems of custom apps that Apple runs as they build iPhones, as they set up Apple stores, as they set up the floor spacing for the Apple stores, they overhaul the Apple stores. They manage the product life cycles in FileMaker. Why? I know, because I built the damn database that does that for them. So they are horribly, and I say horribly, it's not the right word. Well, or whatever. If you hate FileMaker, then yeah, they're horribly committed to FileMaker, and you'd like that part of the business, they should use your product instead of their product. Apple's eating their own dog food. They use their own products. I always tell people eat their own dog food. So if you understand that the company who owns it uses it, I would say a quarter to a third of all the operations that Apple has around the world are driven by Claris FileMaker Pro. So if they're willing to that out the window and kill it, then yeah. But I think yeah. So that's so that's a good question. That's an open question. Is the Claris FileMaker platform a reliable platform that people can invest in? And I had this conversation, I don't know, about 6-8 months with you folks ago, but it's a good conversation, good question. Because you see Claris stumble on something and you're like, oh, how many times can they stumble before something bad happens? Well, I think eventually Apple might get grumpy with them and, have a conversation with them. But that being said, Apple needs to use it. And if Apple wanted to, if it suddenly was gone, right? Apple would probably miss shipping their next 2 or 3 iPhones because of that.
No, like Andy adds that he doesn't think it'll happen in the next 50 years. I think he's also asking what is generalized knowledge that FileMaker gives you about being a software developer.
Boy, I tell you, that's like a dinner conversation kind of thing.
No, and we have 2 minutes before we have to leave. Well,
I know it's a 2-minute conversation. Andy, if you're ever around, I'll take you to dinner, and I will answer the question, or I could try to. But I think it's applicable, right? I think if you weren't doing FileMaker, you need to find another tool that was. See, because FileMaker. Listen, here's the deal. Yes, FileMaker. As a trainer, because I'm a trainer in FileMaker and doing it very, very well, that helped me greatly in becoming a certified flight instructor for aircraft, okay, helicopters, okay. So there are things that transfer over. Project management transfers over. Understanding the scripting and the coding in FileMaker, like my first language I ever learned was BASIC, and then I learned Fortran, then I learned C, and then I learned some Lasso for those, Lasso. That was kind of a language, and then you have FileMaker in there. The languages, programming languages, essentially, for the most part, are very, very similar. Some are more powerful. You can do object-oriented programming, things like that, C#, whatnot. React, I'm looking forward to seeing the JavaScript. But at the end of the day, it's about assigning variables, managing the data, moving around, displaying things, interacting with people. There's a lot of advanced sophistication with that stuff. I think if you learn FileMaker, it moves horizontally. If I have people that know SQL and come to FileMaker, that helps them learn FileMaker faster, okay? That being said, FileMaker is so unique because it's a pro code application. It's a pro code application that has the ability to be very simple for simple people. That doesn't exist anywhere else. Listen, there's been plenty of opportunities for some other company to knock Claris and FileMaker out of the market. They've been there for a long time. Claris has stepped on their cranks on multiple occasions, given competitors huge opportunities to come in if the competitors could manage to overtake and do better what Claris does. No one can, because it's what Claris does is amazingly difficult to do, and their product does it. It kicks, right? And so it's like, oh, someone should knock Claris off. Man, that's like, how many times have you heard someone say, it's the IT groups that hate FileMaker. That's FileMaker. We're going to replace that with insert Oracle or SQL or something else, right? I can count on my hand the last 20 years People say, I hear that about every 10, 15 days, 2, 3 weeks. I think 5 projects over 30 years that I'm aware of have successfully taken a robust Claris FileMaker application and convert to something else, because people who say like that don't understand how powerful FileMaker is and what it does. And if you have to write a check to pay for what FileMaker does in another platform, you're gonna be bleeding out you are going to you may need a blood transfusion. You're going to be bleeding so badly. Okay. It's going to be painful. Okay. So I'm being kind of direct here, but it's true statement, right? Because if there was something better than FileMaker, like legitimately better than FileMaker, I'd probably be doing that too. That being said, despite the missteps, the platform is getting better. It's not going anywhere. And so, yeah, so I'm going to shelve this part of the, it's good I come back just to explain to people it's not going out of business. We should have a live stream. It ain't going out of business. The problem is I can't bring Claris here to tell you that, because that would be grossly self-serving for them. Of course they're not going out of business, right? Yeah, they have some hard competitors and they have to move ahead. That's absolutely true. By the way, if anyone gets a really compelling demo going of that AI, we talked about the chat, GDP or GTP or whatever that's called, the new Andy, you know what I'm talking about? If someone has a good integration with FileMaker and chat GDP, it's kind of a fun thing, right? We asked chat GDP to talk about FileMaker, and it's really good at a very loose level, but if you ask them about our company, it cannot differentiate between the fact that Claris is not RCC and RCC is not Claris. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Yeah, so if someone builds a demo or app for that, I would love to see that. We might even talk about it on a live stream. So Margaret's going to proof up these notes, make sure that we post them for you if anyone's interested. I think it's good material to have. Margaret, get ready to roll the in credits. Richard, can you ask GDP to write scripts? And yes, I know that, but it only goes so far. So that would be what I would like to see, and see how far it can go in doing that, right? Because it's like it can do some things, but as soon as you get to higher level thinking, like, is that appropriate or does that work in this situation or things like that, it falls over. So, but yeah, write me a script that, does something. My couple of my engineers, my staff have been playing with that and they found it fun, but then it rapidly ran out of horsepower. So fun only lasted a limited period of time. Yeah, I don't know. I had people I had heard it from someone else that the thing would write scripts for you in FileMaker. They saw a demo where it wrote scripts for them in FileMaker, but they were pretty limited. So that I've heard that from 2 or 3 people now. So anyway, I'm not sure how good or bad it does. I think the quality varies, right? If artificial intelligence were so great, then the Tesla car wouldn't keep killing people by accident, right? So that would be awesome. Yeah, all right, cool. Anything else?
No, I think we're good.
All right, cool. All right, awesome. So tomorrow Nick will be back. Friday's open Q&A, and I'm going to be trying to get caught up and get in with Claris on any new development there. They're actively working on their freemium offering. Once again, the freemium offering will be, if you're already a part of the FileMaker community, I give you freemium, except that if you already are part of the FileMaker community, you should have it already, which is kind of weird. So I think they're trying to test freemium out on you to see what you think about it. Once again, freemium will be Claris Pro, basically the idea to make it free for single users. They're talking about doing it with server 2, with 1 or 2 users on it, but that's not really where the real super high value comes from. It's when you take a FileMaker solution and you share it with a whole team of people. All right, yep, good one. Thank you, Mr. Monkey Bread. I will go back and check that and then recap anything in there. And if you have any feedback on that live stream, let me know about that. David Angel, anything else on you? We're done? Yes. Cool. Thanks. All right, cool. Run it, Marks. Thanks.
Yep, we're running it.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.